Irish twins, raised like one blurred childhood. Kourtney Kardashian, Kim Kardashian, 18 months apart, less than 2 years, separate you and your closest sibling too. Doctors used to call this bad timing. New research says something stranger. A psychologist at the University of Tennessee surveyed over 1,700 teenage boys. She found children felt worse about themselves and their parents when siblings were spaced 2 years apart. That feeling disappeared under 1 year, or past 4. You landed in the tightest window there is. It shaped something specific. 2 children at nearly the same stage compete for identical resources at the same time. Same toys, same attention. More conflict, yes, but also more practice. You learn to negotiate and try again. Before most children even had a rival in the house. 50,000 years ago, closely spaced offspring meant 2 vulnerable children needing protection at once. You learned to read each other fast, just to get your share. But the closeness carried a quieter cost. You rarely got to be one person. You were the 2 of you before anyone learned your name apart. Now it shows up as instinct. You still solve friction fast, and you still fight quietly to be seen as your own person. Large family, lost in the count, sharpened by it. Stephen Colbert, youngest of 11. Dolly Parton, 1 of 12. Mel Gibson, 6th of 11. Every additional sibling reportedly costs 1/5 of a year of schooling, according to economists tracking family size for decades. This framing calls large families a loss. Psychologist Robert Zionk named the mechanism the confluence model. Each new child dilutes the family's intellectual environment. That is the deficit story. It is not the whole story. For most of human history, a large sibling group was a caregiving network, not a resource problem. Older children fed younger ones and taught them, freeing parents to hunt and gather. The mechanism has a name: cooperative breeding, credited with helping humans outlast other primates. In a group of 6 or 7, you negotiated with a shifting hierarchy every single day. That constant negotiation produced fast social calibration. You learned to read status, timing, and mood across multiple people at once. The trade-off is real. Getting noticed took volume, timing, or luck. Attention in your house had to be earned, quietly, every day. But the same environment shaped a nervous system suited for groups. You do not freeze in a crowded room. You grew up inside one. Same-sex sibling. No gender to hide behind. Venus Williams, Serena Williams, 15 months apart. Brother pairs report the most rivalry of any sibling combination researchers track. Sister pairs report the most warmth. The Williams sisters turned that closeness into one of sport's great partnerships. With a different sex sibling, gender itself does some of the differentiating work. 2 brothers or 2 sisters chase the same targets in the same house, with nothing else to separate the claim. 50,000 years ago, 2 same-sex offspring meant 2 people suited to the identical role: hunting, gathering, defending. You learn to differentiate the hard way, through achievement or dominance. That is why brothers so often compete through visible wins, while sisters, researchers find, form closeness through shared confiding instead. The cost is real. Competition can curdle into comparison at a table where you were the only 2 people it could apply to. Some of you are still, quietly, keeping score. But the drive that came from having no easy way to stand out never left. You find your edge by being provably better at something, not by a difference you never earned. Opposite sex sibling, the story that did not stick. Gentler with sisters, tougher with brothers. That is the theory, and psychologists have argued it for 70 years. Observational studies from the 1950s found a pattern. Boys with older sisters showed more kindness and cooperation. Girls with older brothers showed more competitiveness. Psychologists called it role assimilation. For decades, that theory held, until 2022. Economist Thomas Dudek and colleagues tested it using 85,887 people across 9 countries and 12 surveys. They found sibling gender left no detectable mark on adult personality, not on a single trait tested. The sister or brother you grew up with may have shaped how you acted as a kid. That shift was likely real, and it mattered while it lasted. But personality settles by adulthood, closer to your own baseline than your sibling's gender ever predicted. Some part of you may have formed an origin story around a sibling's influence, a tidy explanation for why you are gentle or competitive. Researchers quietly pulled the foundation out from under it. Evolution did not need you permanently softened or hardened by a sibling. It needed you flexible enough to adapt to whoever grew up beside you, then return to yourself. That flexibility is the actual inheritance. Twin order, the minute that decided everything. Mark Kelly, Scott Kelly. 6 minutes apart, 1 minute, sometimes less. That is the entire gap between you and your twin. Evolution still treats it like decades. When NASA needed a baseline for a year-long spaceflight study, they used that 6-minute difference. Scott went to orbit. Mark stayed on Earth. A study of 80 twin pairs found the firstborn twin scored higher on APGAR tests at birth. Oxygen levels were better too. Position in the womb during those final minutes mattered. That head start did not stay marginal. The larger, healthier twin at birth often becomes the one who leads early, first to walk, first to take charge. Studies of the general population have found no link between ordinary birth order and personality. Twins may be the exception, decided by biology, in the minutes before delivery. If you were twin A, you likely absorbed a small advantage and formed an identity around leading. If you were twin B, you carried slightly higher risk at birth. You spent your life introduced second, defined in relation to someone else. Neither position is bigger than the other. 1 minute created a role, it did not create a ceiling. Blended family. Your old position just got erased. Divorce, remarriage, a stranger becomes your sibling overnight. Your position in the family can change before you agree to it. Psychiatrist Alfred Adler argued birth order was never about being born first. It was about the role you occupy in the family system, what psychologists now call psychological birth order. Kate Hudson grew up at the center of one of Hollywood's most famously blended families. She is one of 7 siblings, mixed across relationships. A firstborn can suddenly become a middle child the moment a step-parent's older kids move in. A youngest can become the oldest overnight, without the years of practice that role usually takes. Family therapists estimate it takes around 7 years for a blended family to fully settle. That means years of renegotiating who leads and who defers at the table. For most of human history, family groups were rarely fixed either. Adapting quickly to a new role mattered more than clinging to an old one that no longer existed. That adaptability still runs in you, but name the cost honestly. You lost a role you had not finished growing into. Nobody asked if you were ready to let it go. You proved something most people never have to prove. Your identity did not depend on holding one fixed position in one fixed family. Adopted child, 2 different birth orders at once. 2 families gave you 2 different birth orders. Only one was ever written down. In 1990, researchers studied something nobody had properly tested. Children adopted into a birth position different from the one they were born into. Firstborns by biology placed as the younger child, or the reverse. The rearing order barely mattered on most measures. One trait moved anyway. Conscientiousness rose in children raised as the firstborn, whatever position they were actually born into. For most of human history, children moved between family units constantly. Death, remarriage, and informal adoption reshaped a wider band. The role you were given mattered more than the exact order you arrived in. That flexibility became your inheritance. You can step into a position that was never technically yours. The cost is quieter. Adoption researchers describe children who feel distinctly out of place beside biological siblings, caught between gratitude for the family that chose them and grief for the one that did not keep them. You may have spent years proving you belonged in a position nobody handed you by blood. That is the actual skill this position shaped in you, earning a place instead of assuming one. Born after loss, carrying a name that was not only yours. Vincent van Gogh was born exactly 1 year after his mother's first son was stillborn. That son was also named Vincent. He grew up walking past a grave that carried his own name. In 1964, psychologists Albert and Barbara Kane gave this pattern a name, the replacement child. Some children born after a sibling's death grow into themselves easily. Others carry a shape they never chose. If you were born close after a sibling's death, you may have absorbed a role before you understood its purpose. A name mentioned carefully, an absence nobody explained but everyone felt. For most of human history, a lost child meant a lost investment. Years of protection ending with nothing to show for it. A child born soon after often received that redirected hope. Evolution rewarded parents who kept investing after a loss. You may be the result of that instinct working as intended. That does not make the weight lighter. Researchers describe children caught between 2 identities, their own and the shadow of someone they never met. Feeling invisible next to a memory is a documented cost, but researchers also found many of these children became notably high achievers, driven to matter distinctly, on their own terms, not as a stand-in for anyone. You were never only a replacement, you were a whole person who had to work harder to prove it, even to yourself. What this actually means for you. Birth order was never only about being first, middle, or last. It was about timing, spacing, gender, biology, and the family you landed in. Sometimes more than once, sometimes twice over. The closely spaced sibling learned to negotiate early. The one from a large family learned to read a crowd. The one with no gender buffer learned to compete without cover. The twin born a minute later turned a small cost into drive. The blended child learned identity survives a shifting structure. The adopted child learned to earn a place instead of assuming one. The child born after loss learned to become whole, distinct from a memory. None of these positions were random. Each one solved a real problem for the people who lived through it, long before anyone called it psychology. The pattern is still running in you, whether you ever noticed it or not. Your birth order shaped you. It does not own you.